The cafe was full of noise. The clinking of cups, the chatter of customers, and the soft music playing in the background made it a busy place. Among the crowd, a young woman moved quickly and carefully. She was a waitress named Mia. Mia was not like the other girls who worked here. Her arms were covered in scars long, deep, and old. They told stories of pain and struggles that no one in the cafe could understand. Mia wore a long-sleeved shirt even though it was warm, hiding the marks that she did not want others to see. But sometimes, when she reached for a cup or wiped a table, a scar would show for just a moment. And that was enough to make some people stare. At one table, a group of young men noticed Mia's scars. They whispered and laughed quietly among themselves. "Look at her," one said. "She looks like she has been through a war." Another added, "Maybe she's dangerous or crazy." They pointed and made faces, not caring that Mia could hear them. They thought it was funny to make fun of someone who was just trying to do her job, but Mia ignored them. She had learned a long time ago that people would judge without knowing the truth. Her scars were not just marks. They were the proof of a life that was hard and full of secrets. Mia moved to another table, serving coffee to a family. The little boy smiled at her, but his parents looked away. Mia noticed the way they whispered and exchanged looks. It was the same everywhere she went. People looked at her scars with fear or disgust. They did not know she had saved lives, fought battles, and survived things that would break most people. They only saw the scars, not the story behind them. As she walked back to the counter, a new customer entered the cafe. He was an older man, tall and strong, with a calm but serious face. He wore a jacket with a badge on it, a symbol of someone who had served in the military. Mia saw him and felt something she had not felt in a long time, a small hope. The man sat down at a corner table and watched the room quietly. The young men who had been laughing at Mia noticed the new man too. They stopped their teasing for a moment and looked at him with curiosity. He did not look like someone who would laugh at others. His eyes were sharp and full of experience. He seemed to understand things that the others did not. Mia brought the man a menu. When she placed it in front of him, he looked at her arms for a moment. Then, his eyes fixed on a small tattoo on her wrist that peeked out from under her sleeve. It was a symbol that few people recognized, a sign of a secret group of veterans who had been part of a special mission long ago. The man's face changed. He nodded slightly, almost like a silent greeting. The young men noticed the change too. They saw how the man looked at Mia with respect, not laughter. They started to feel confused. Why was this stranger different? Why did he see Mia in a new light? For the first time, the cafe felt a different kind of silence filled with questions and surprise. Mia felt her heart beat faster. She was afraid but also curious. She wanted to talk to the man, to tell him her story, but she was not sure if she should. She had kept her past hidden for so long. What if people found out? What if they judged her even more? The man called Mia over. His voice was calm but strong. "May I speak with you for a moment?" he asked. Mia nodded and went to his table. The young men stopped their whispering and watched. The man introduced himself as Captain Reynolds. He said he had served in the military. Just like Mia, he had seen many soldiers come and go, but her tattoo was special. It was a mark of bravery and sacrifice. He told Mia that he understood what she had been through, even if the rest of the world did not. Mia listened quietly. For the first time in years, someone saw her not as a scarred waitress, but as a hero. Captain Reynolds asked if she was ready to share her story. Mia looked around. The cafe was still full of people, some still watching, some still judging, but she felt a new strength inside her. She decided to speak, just a little. She told Captain Reynolds about the mission she had been part of, a secret war that few knew about. She told him about the battles, the pain, and the losses. She told him about the scars that were more than skin deep. Captain Reynolds nodded, with respect, his eyes never leaving hers. The young men who had laughed before began to listen to. They could see now that Mia was not someone to be made fun of. She was a survivor, a fighter. The laughter in the cafe died down. It was replaced by whispers of awe and respect. Mia finished her story, feeling lighter than she had in years. Captain Reynolds stood up and smiled. "You are not alone," he said. "There are many of us who understand, and we will not let the world forget the sacrifices we made." The cafe customers looked at Mia differently now. Some came forward to say, sorry for judging her. Others asked questions wanting to know more. The young men who laughed at her scars before now felt shame. They realized how wrong they had been. Mia smiled softly. For the first time, her scars felt like badges of honor, not marks of shame. She had found someone who saw her truth. And maybe, just maybe, the world was ready to see it too. As Captain Reynolds left the cafe, he looked back at Mia and gave a small nod of encouragement. Mia knew this was only the beginning. Her story was far from over. There were battles still waiting, and secrets still hidden. But now, she was not alone, and that made all the difference. The crowd in the cafe slowly returned to normal, but something had changed. The laughter was gone, replaced by a quiet respect. And Mia, the scarred waitress, was no longer invisible. She was seen, she was heard, and her story was just beginning. The cafe had quieted down since Captain Reynolds had arrived. Mia sat at the corner table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The scars on her arms no longer felt like a burden, but a reminder of everything she had survived. Across from her, Captain Reynolds watched her closely, his eyes filled with understanding. The air between them was heavy with unspoken stories. For a long moment, neither spoke. Mia felt the weight of his gaze. It was different from the curious or mocking looks. She was used to this man, had seen things that only people like her could understand. Finally, he broke the silence. "That tattoo," Captain Reynolds said softly, nodding toward her wrist where the symbol peeked from under her sleeve. "It means more than most people know." Mia looked down at the faded ink. It was a simple, design lines and shapes that formed a symbol for an elite group of soldiers who had fought in a secret mission years ago. Most people did not recognize it. It was not something they learned about in school or read in the news. It was a mark of honor among those who had risked everything for their planet. "Not many see it," Mia whispered, "and fewer still understand what it means." Captain Reynolds leaned forward. "I was part of that mission. I know what you and the others went through." Mia's heart skipped a beat. She had never told anyone about that mission, not her family, not her friends, and certainly not strangers. The memories were sharp and painful, like the scars on her skin. She took a deep breath and began to speak. She told Captain Reynolds about the war that had come from the stars, a secret fight against an enemy so strong and unknown that the world never knew it was happening. How they had been chosen for a dangerous mission to protect humanity. How they had fought in places no one would believe, and how many had not come back. "The scars," she said, her voice trembling a little, "they are proof of those battles. Not just physical wounds, but the pain of loss and the burden of survival." Captain Reynolds nodded slowly. "I lost friends on that mission too. We all did." Outside the cafe window, the world seemed ordinary, but inside, Mia and Captain Reynolds were connected by something extraordinary. Two warriors who carried invisible weight, two souls marked by sacrifice. But even as Mia shared her story, a cold feeling crept in. The cafe was still full of people, many of whom still whispered and stared. Some were afraid, some were angry. The truth was dangerous. It could change everything. Mia wondered if people knew the truth, would they finally respect her, or would they be even more afraid? Suddenly, the door opened, and more customers came in. One of the young men from before, the one who had laughed at Mia's scars, caught sight of her talking to Captain Reynolds. His face twisted with confusion and anger. He whispered to his friends, and their eyes narrowed. Mia felt their eyes on her again, but this time, it was different. She was not hiding. She was not afraid. She was ready. Captain Reynolds looked at her and smiled faintly. "You have a story that needs to be told, not just to me, but to the world." Mia swallowed hard. She'll do that? Could she face the laughter, the fear, and the judgment one more time? She looked at her tattoo and then back at the crowd. "I will try," she said quietly, "because maybe, if they understand, they will see what I really am." The young men watching her exchanged uneasy glances. The laughter had died down, replaced by silence and uncertainty. Outside the cafe, the sky was darkening. A storm was coming, but inside, a different kind of storm was beginning. A storm of truth, courage, and change. Mia took a deep breath. The tattoo on her wrist was not just ink. It was a symbol of hope. A symbol that even in the darkest times, humanity could stand strong. And this was only the beginning. The cafe had grown quieter since Captain Reynolds arrived. Mia sat across from him, feeling a strange mix of nervousness and relief. For years, she had hidden her past, locking it away like a secret treasure no one could find. But now, with this man who understood without needing explanations, she felt a crack in her armor. Captain Reynolds' eyes never left her tattoo. The small symbol inked on her wrist, a mark so simple yet so full of meaning. It was the sign of a special group of soldiers who had faced battles most people didn't even know existed. Mia had thought no one would ever recognize it, yet here was a man who not only saw it but knew its story. Taking a shaky breath, Mia began to speak softly, telling him about the war that had come from beyond the stars. An invisible war where humanity had been tested like never before. She spoke of the secret mission she had been part of, a mission so dangerous that only a few had survived. The scars on her arms were not just wounds but memories of pain, loss, and moments when hope seemed lost. As she told her story, the weight on her chest lightened, even if just a little, because finally, someone listened without judgment. Captain Reynolds nodded slowly, his face full of understanding and sorrow. He told Mia he had been part of that mission too and had seen many friends fall in battle. The tattoo they shared was more than a symbol, it was a promise made in blood and fire to protect their world at all costs. Outside the window, life went on like nothing had changed. But inside the cafe, two veterans quietly connected over a truth the world had ignored for too long. Yet as Mia spoke, she could feel the eyes of others on her. Some customers whispered, behind their hands, their faces a mix of fear and suspicion. The young men who had laughed at her scars before were watching too, their expressions darkening. They could not understand why this stranger respected Mia, and that made them uneasy. The tension in the room grew heavier, and Mia realized that, while one person could understand her story, most others were still trapped in ignorance and fear. She wondered if sharing her truth would change anything or just make her an even bigger target for judgment. But Captain Reynolds' calm voice broke through her doubts as he encouraged her to keep telling her story not just to him, but to the world. People need to know, he said. They need to understand what you and others like you have done. Mia looked down at her tattoo, tracing the lines with her finger beneath the sleeve. That small mark was now a beacon of hope for her, a reminder that even in the darkest times, humanity had fought back. She straightened her shoulders and looked back up at the crowd. The young men were no longer laughing. Their faces held something new: confusion, respect, and maybe even fear. The whispers stopped as people began to see Mia differently. The scars that once made her invisible now made her powerful in their eyes. The storm outside was growing louder, but inside the cafe, a different kind of storm was brewing, one of change, courage, and the truth breaking through silence. Mia knew the road ahead would be hard. She knew there would be more questions, more judgment, and maybe even rejection. But she also knew she was no longer alone. Captain Reynolds had reminded her that the scars in the tattoo were not just marks of pain but symbols of survival and strength. And that gave her hope that maybe one day, the world would see what she truly was: a fighter, a protector, and a hero whose story was just beginning to be told. Mia stood behind the counter, her hands trembling slightly as she wiped down a table. The cafe had slowly filled up again after Captain Reynolds left, but the atmosphere had shifted. The usual chatter was quieter, and the glances she caught from customers felt heavier. Some eyes were curious, some filled with pity, and others still full of judgment. The scars on her arms seemed to draw more attention than ever, and Mia could feel the weight of it pressing down on her chest like a heavy stone. She had thought that sharing her story with Captain Reynolds might change how people saw her, but the truth was, most of them were still trapped in their own fears and misunderstandings. It was easier for them to laugh and judge than to try to understand. A group of young men at a nearby table whispered again, their words low but sharp like knives. "Why would someone like her work here?" one said. "With all those scars, what happened to her?" They didn't know, and maybe they didn't want to know. To them, Mia was just a waitress with strange marks, someone to mock, someone to fear. Mia's heart ached, but she kept working. She had learned long ago that pain did not disappear when others saw it. Sometimes it grew deeper. Her scars were reminders of battles fought not just outside but inside herself. Each mark told a story of survival, of nights spent hiding in dark places, of fights against enemies with weapons far beyond human technology, and of friends lost in silence. Yet, here she was, serving coffee to people who could never understand what those scars meant. They judged her without a second thought, making her feel small and invisible. But Mia had a secret: they did not know how strong she really was. She had faced death and come back. She had fought wars they couldn't imagine. The tattoo on her wrist, now hidden beneath her sleeve, was a symbol of that strength. But no one here saw it for what it truly meant. Across the room, one of the young men who had been mocking Mia suddenly stood up. His face was hard, and his voice loud enough to draw attention. "Why do you even stay here?" he asked, pointing at her scars. "You don't belong in a place like this." The cafe fell silent. All eyes turned to Mia. For a moment, she felt the old fear rising, the fear of being exposed, of being hurt again. But then, something inside her shifted. She looked at the young man straight in the eyes and spoke with a calm she did not fully feel. "I belong here," she said quietly but firmly. "More than you could ever understand." The words surprised everyone, especially the young men who had been so sure of themselves. Some customers whispered their agreement. The atmosphere changed again, this time with a mix of respect and disbelief. Mia had stood her ground, showing that her scars were not weaknesses but signs of her courage. At that moment, the door opened once more, and Captain Reynolds stepped back inside. He scanned the room and saw the tension. He walked over to Mia, sighed, and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "She is not just a waitress," he said. "She is one of the bravest people I know. Those scars tell a story of sacrifice and strength that deserves respect, not laughter." The young men shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away, ashamed. Others whispered, "Maybe we were wrong." Captain Reynolds continued, telling the cafe about the secret mission and the battles that Mia and others had fought to protect humanity. Slowly, the crowd began to listen, not just with their ears, but with their hearts. The judgment and pain in the room did not disappear, but it started to change. And for Mia, that change was the beginning of something new, a chance to be seen for who she really was. After the cafe settled down, Mia and Captain Reynolds found a quiet corner to talk more. The noise of the busy place faded as they spoke about the secret war few knew had ever happened. Mia explained how this war was different. It was not fought in open fields or famous battlefields. It was fought in shadows, hidden from the eyes of most people. Enemy forces had come from distant planets, unknown to regular humans, with weapons and technology far beyond anything on Earth. This war had tested the limits of humanity's courage and strength. Mia's scars and the tattoo on her wrist were proof of her part in this hidden battle. Captain Reynolds listened carefully, his face serious, knowing how dangerous and lonely their fight had been. He shared stories from his side, tooth at times, when hope was almost lost, when friends fell, And when humanity's future hung by a thread, the hidden war was not just about fighting enemies. It was about protecting the innocent people who had no idea what was happening. Mia told Captain Reynolds how they had to keep their mission secret, even from their families and friends. The world had to stay calm, unaware of the dangers lurking. In space, they had fought in silence, risking everything with no thanks or recognition. This was the pain Mia carried every day, the loneliness of being a warrior who must hide her true self. But Captain Reynolds said she was not alone anymore. He reminded her that many others like her were still out there, fighting quietly and waiting for the day when the truth would come out. That day, he said, would change everything. As they talked, Mia's thoughts drifted to the people around them in the cafe. They did not know what she had lived through. Most could not even imagine it. The world was so busy with everyday life that it did not see the battles being fought to protect it. Mia wondered if she would ever be able to tell her full story. Would the world accept the truth, or would they be afraid and turn away? Captain Reynolds could sense her doubts. He put a hand on her shoulder and said, "We fought to give the world a chance. Now it's time to give them the truth. They need to know who we really are and what we are capable of." His words gave Mia strength. For the first time, she felt ready to face not just the enemies in space, but also the fears and judgments here on Earth. Just then, a sudden noise outside caught their attention. The cafe door swung open quickly, and several people hurried in, talking in low but urgent voices. Captain Reynolds and Mia exchanged a glance. Something was happening, something important. The hidden war was not over. It was closer than anyone thought. The quiet life they had tried to build was being pulled into chaos again. But this time, Mia was not alone. She had a new ally, a new hope. Together, they would stand and fight for the truth, for humanity, and for a future where scars were no longer signs of shame but of strength. The calm after the cafe conversation did not last long. As Mia and Captain Reynolds prepared to leave, a cold feeling settled over them. Outside the windows, shadows moved in strange ways, and an uneasy silence filled the air. The hidden war they had fought before was not finished, was coming back, and this time the enemy was closer than they had ever imagined. Mia felt her heartbeat quicken. She knew that those scars and that tattoo were not just memories. They were warnings. The enemy was still out there, hiding in the dark, watching and waiting for the right moment to strike again. Captain Reynolds looked serious. "They're here," he said quietly. "The ones we thought we had left behind?" Inside the cafe, the regular customers sensed the change too, though they didn't know why. The air felt thick with tension, and whispers started again, this time with fear. No one could see the enemy lurking just beyond the city's lights. But the veterans knew. Mia and Reynolds exchanged a look full of determination. They couldn't let anyone else suffer the way they had. The enemy was not just a distant threat anymore. It was real, close, and dangerous. They had to act quickly, but first, they needed to gather more information. They planned to contact old allies, people who had once fought alongside them in the shadows. Every second counted. As night fell, Mia walked home, her mind racing. The city seemed peaceful, but she knew better. Danger hid behind the familiar streets and friendly faces. She remembered the battle's silent fights in the darkness, where every mistake could mean death. The scars on her arms itched as if warning her. She touched her tattoo gently, feeling the strength it gave her. Mia knew she had to prepare not just for herself, but for everyone she cared about. She had to find her old team and warn them. The hidden war was back, and this time, it would not wait in silence. Back at the cafe, Captain Reynolds sent messages to former soldiers, his fingers moving fast over the screen. The enemy's return was no longer a secret, but a dangerous truth. The veterans had to reunite, to fight together once more. They had survived before because they stood as one, and now, they needed that unity more than ever. Mia's story was not just about scars and tattoos anymore. It was about a fight for survival, a battle against shadows that threatened to consume everything. The night grew darker, but Mia's resolve grew stronger. The enemy was in the shadows, but she was ready to face them head-on. The message came through just after midnight. Captain Reynolds sat alone in a dimly lit room, his eyes fixed on the glowing screen. The information was urgent and clear. The enemy forces had been spotted, moving closer to Earth's outer defenses. They were planning something big, something dangerous. Reynolds' fingers moved quickly, sending out calls to the veterans scattered across the world. Mia received the message too, her heart pounding as she read the warning. This was no longer a quiet fight in the shadows. The battle was about to erupt in the open, and they had to be ready. She looked down at her scars, and the tattoo that marked her as one of the few who could stand against the threat. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders. There was no turning back now. Mia's mind raced with memories of the past, the training, the missions, and the sacrifices. She knew that this call to action meant more than just fighting enemies. It meant protecting everyone who believed life would continue in peace. The people in the cafe, the families in the city, even those who had judged her scars, they all depended on her now. She thought about her old team, the people she had once trusted with her life. She needed to find them, to bring them together again. Every second was precious. The hidden war was about to become real for everyone. Mia stood up, her resolve firm, She would no longer hide in the background. This was her fight, and she would face it head-on. Captain Reynolds arrived at the meeting point first, a secure location where the veterans could gather without being seen. One by one, familiar faces appeared, warriors from different parts of the world, each marked by their own scars and stories. There was a quiet strength in the room, a shared understanding of what was at stake. Mia's eyes searched for her old teammates, and soon, they were there, ready and waiting. The reunion was not warm or happy, it was serious and tense. They all knew the dangers ahead. Captain Reynolds spoke clearly, outlining the enemy's movements and the plan to stop them. The team listened carefully, each member aware that failure was not an option. As they prepared their gear and weapons, Mia felt a mixture of fear and hope. The scars on her arms itched again, but this time it was different. It was the call to fight, the signal that she was not alone. The team's bond was strong, forged in battles that only they could remember. Now, they had to stand together once more to protect humanity. The hidden war was no longer hidden, and the stakes were higher than ever. Mia took a deep breath, ready to step into the storm. This was the moment she had waited for, the chance to prove that scars were not signs of weakness, but of courage and survival. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the low murmur of voices. One by one, the veterans arrived at the secure meeting place, their faces tired but determined. Mia stood by the door, watching as familiar figures entered, teammates she hadn't seen in years. Time had changed them. Some had scars like hers, others had lost limbs, and a few moved slower, carrying invisible wounds of the mind. But the fire in their eyes was still strong. They nodded at Mia with respect, remembering the battles they had fought together in silence. The air was heavy with memories, painful, but also proud. For all the years apart, they were still a team. The reunion was not filled with hugs or laughter, but with a quiet understanding that they had a mission to complete. Captain Reynolds took charge, his voice calm but firm as he addressed the group. "We've been called back because the enemy has returned. They are stronger and more dangerous than before. Our mission is clear: protect Earth and stop them at all costs." The veterans listened intently, knowing the risks. For many, this was not just a fight for survival, but a chance to protect those who had no idea what was at stake. Mia felt the weight of the responsibility settle even deeper in her chest. She glanced around at the faces of her old team. They had changed, but their courage had not. Together, they began to plan, sharing knowledge and preparing for the battle ahead. There was no room for mistakes. As the meeting went on, Mia caught up with her closest teammates, people who had once been her family in the war. They spoke quietly about the past, the friends they had lost, and the fears that still haunted them. But there was also hope. They had survived once, and now they had a chance to do it again. Mia showed them her tattoo, the symbol of their shared mission and sacrifice. Her teammates smiled, some with tears in their eyes. It was a reminder that no matter how long they had been apart, their bond was unbreakable. The scars on their bodies and souls told a story of strength, pain, and loyalty. Before the meeting ended, Captain Reynolds looked at each member of the team and said, "We don't know what's waiting for us, but we do know this: we face it together. Our scars are proof of what we've endured, and our unity is what will make us strong." Mia felt a surge of pride and determination. The reunion was more than a gathering, it was a promise. A promise that they would fight not just for themselves, but for everyone who believed in a future free from fear. As the veterans prepared to leave the room and face the coming battle, Mia knew one thing for sure: this was her family, and together, they were ready. The veterans gathered in a large, secure room filled with advanced technology and weapons. The air smelled of metal and oil, and soft lights glowed from the consoles around them. Mia watched as her old teammates checked their gear carefully, each movement practiced and precise. The years apart had not dulled their skills. They moved like soldiers, ready for battle, focused and serious. Captain Reynolds stood at the front giving orders and sharing new information about the enemy's latest technology. The threat was growing stronger, and they needed to be smarter, faster, and stronger than before. Mia felt the familiar rush of adrenaline mixed with nerves. This was what she had trained for, but the stakes had never been higher. As the team prepared their weapons and armor, they shared stories of their lives since the last mission. Some had started families, others had tried to live quiet lives, but the call to fight had brought them back. Mia listened quietly, grateful to be with people who understood the cost of their sacrifice. She showed them new modifications on her suits, small improvements she had made to help her fight better. Her tattoo peeked out from beneath her sleeve, a constant reminder of the battles behind and the battles ahead. The veterans worked as one, a well-oiled machine ready to face the unknown. The tension in the room was thick, but so was the sense of unity and hope. Captain Reynolds gathered the team for a final briefing. "This battle will test us like never before," he said, his voice steady. "We face enemies who have learned and adapted. They will try to break us, to scare us. But remember, our scars show we have already survived the worst. Our strength is in our unity. We fight not just for ourselves, but for everyone who depends on us." The veterans nodded, their faces set with determination. Mia felt a fire ignite inside her. She was no longer the scared waitress with scars. She was a warrior ready to protect her world. Every injury, every scar had prepared her for this moment. Before leaving the room, Mia took a deep breath and looked around at her team. They were more than soldiers, they were family. She knew the coming battle would be the hardest fight of their lives, but together, they would face it. The enemy in the shadows was real, and they were ready. The hidden war was no longer hidden, and the time for action had come. As the veterans moved out, ready for what lay ahead, Mia felt a new strength coursing through her veins. This was their fight, and they would not back down. The night was dark and quiet as Mia and her team moved through the deserted streets outside the city. Their mission was clear: find the enemy's forward base, and stop their plans before they could strike Earth. The veterans moved with careful steps, their eyes sharp, weapons ready. Every sound made them tense. An unexpected noise, a shadow, shifting, a whisper in the wind. The hidden war was no longer hidden, and danger was closer than ever. Mia felt her heart pounding, but she kept calm. This was what she had trained for. Her scars itched, reminding her of past battles and the strength she needed now. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught Mia's eye. Before she could react, enemy drones appeared, sleek and silent, scanning the area with red lights. The team quickly took cover behind a wall, whispering commands and checking their weapons. The drones were faster and smarter than before, using technology the veterans had never seen. Captain Reynolds signaled to move carefully, but the enemy had already noticed them. A sudden blast shook the ground nearby. The battle had begun. Mia's team fired back, their weapons lighting up the dark street. The fight was fierce and fast. Mia moved like a shadow, dodging attacks and striking with precision. Her teammates fought bravely, but the enemy's numbers seemed endless. The team realized they had to retreat, but Captain Reynolds saw an opening. "Cover me," he shouted, moving forward to take out a drone control unit. Mia covered him, firing at the drones that swarmed toward him. The tension was high, every second critical. The fight was not just for survival, it was for the future of their world. Mia's scars burned with pain but also with determination. She remembered why they fought, not just for themselves, but for everyone who believed in peace. The first encounter had been a warning, a test of strength from the enemy. They were ready for war. As the team pulled back to safety, Mia looked at her tattoo and whispered, "We won't give up." The enemy was strong, but so were they. The hidden war was now a battle for Earth's survival, and Mia was ready to face whatever came next. The fight had just begun. After the first battle, the team returned to their base, tired but not defeated. The quiet room was filled with the low sounds of breathing and soft footsteps, as everyone checked their wounds and repaired their gear. Mia sat apart, her scars feeling raw and painful from the fight. The memory of the enemy's drones flashing red lights haunted her. She knew this was just the beginning. The threat was growing, and the enemy was learning. Captain Reynolds gathered the veterans for a meeting. His voice was serious, and the room fell silent. "They will come again," he said, "stronger, faster, more prepared. We must be ready." The team listened, feeling the weight of the warning. Mia's thoughts raced. The enemy's power was no longer hidden, and neither was the danger. She looked around at the faces of her teammates, some tired, some scared, but all determined. They had faced worse before, but this time, the stakes were higher. The enemy wasn't just fighting for victory, they wanted to destroy hope. Mia touched her tattoo, drawing strength from the symbol of their shared past and courage. The veterans began planning, sharing ideas and strategies to counter the new threat. Every detail mattered. Every move could mean the difference between survival and defeat. The room buzzed with energy and urgency. Outside, the city slept, unaware of the war rising in the shadows. Mia thought about the people who judged her scars so harshly, the ones who laughed and whispered. They didn't know what those marks meant. They didn't know about the sacrifices made to protect them. Now, those people were counting on Mia and her team more than ever. It was a heavy burden, but Mia felt ready to carry it. She had accepted that her scars were part of her story, a story of pain, courage, and survival, and she would wear them proudly. Captain Reynolds ended the meeting with a powerful reminder. "We fight not just for ourselves," he said. "We fight for everyone who believes in a future worth living. The enemy may be strong, but together, we are stronger. Our scars are proof of that strength." The veterans stood united, ready to face the rising threat. Mia's heart pounded with determination. The hidden war was no longer hidden, and the battle for Earth's future was only getting fiercer. The day of the final battle had arrived. Mia and her team stood together at the edge of the battlefield, the sun barely rising behind the dark clouds. The air was thick with tension and the sound of distant thunder. Each soldier checked their weapons and gear one last time, their faces set with determination. The scars on Mia's arms burned as if reminding her of every fight she had ever faced, but this battle was different. This was the fight that would decide the future of Earth. The hidden war was coming to light, and there was no turning back. Captain Reynolds looked at the team and said, "We fight as one, for our world, for those we lost, and for those who still believe." The team nodded, their silence stronger than any words. As the enemy forces appeared on the horizon, Mia's heart raced, but her hands were steady. The first wave of attackers moved quickly and fiercely. The veterans fought bravely, their experience and unity giving them strength. Mia moved like a shadow, striking with precision and speed. The battle was loud and chaotic, with explosions and laser fire lighting the dark sky. But despite the chaos, Mia could feel the power of her team, the bond that held them together through every danger. The scars she once hid now felt like armor, protecting her not just physically but in spirit. She fought not just for herself, but for every person who had ever judged her without knowing her story. The enemy pressed harder, but the veterans held their ground. Captain Reynolds led the charge, inspiring the team with his courage. Slowly, the tide of battle began to turn. The enemy's strength was great, but the veterans' will was greater. They pushed forward, fighting through pain and fear. Mia looked around at her teammates, some wounded, some exhausted, but all still fighting. She realized that their scars were more than marks of past battles. They were symbols of hope and survival. With a fierce cry, Mia and her team launched the final attack, breaking the enemy's line and sending them retreating into the shadows. As silence finally fell over the battlefield, Mia stood among her team, breathing heavily but proud. The war was over for now. The hidden fight had come to light, and the world would never be the same. Mia's scars no longer made her invisible or weak. They made her a hero. Captain Reynolds placed a hand on her shoulder and said quietly, "You've shown the world what courage really means." The crowd of survivors gathered around them, their eyes full of respect and gratitude. For the first time, Mia felt truly seen and accepted. The scars told a story not of pain, but of strength, sacrifice, and hope, and that story would live on. After the first battle, the team returned to their base, tired but not defeated. The quiet room was filled with the low sounds of breathing and soft footsteps, as everyone checked their wounds and repaired their gear. Mia sat apart, her scars feeling raw and painful from the fight. The memory of the enemy's drones flashing red lights haunted her. She knew this was just the beginning. The threat was growing, and the enemy was learning. Captain Reynolds gathered the veterans for a meeting. His voice was serious, and the room fell silent. "They will come again," he said, "stronger, faster, more prepared. We must be ready." The team listened, feeling the weight of the warning. Mia's thoughts raced. The enemy's power was no longer hidden, and neither was the danger. She looked around at the faces of her teammates, some tired, some scared, but all determined. They had faced worse before, but this time, the stakes were higher. The enemy wasn't just fighting for victory, they wanted to destroy hope. Mia touched her tattoo, drawing strength from the symbol of their shared past and courage. The veterans began planning, sharing ideas and strategies to counter the new threat. Every detail mattered. Every move could mean the difference between survival and defeat. The room buzzed with energy and urgency. Outside, the city slept, unaware of the war rising in the shadows. Mia thought about the people who judged her scars so harshly, the ones who laughed and whispered. They didn't know what those marks meant. They didn't know about the sacrifices made to protect them. Now, those people were counting on Mia and her team more than ever. It was a heavy burden, but Mia felt ready to carry it. She had accepted that her scars were part of her story, a story of pain, courage, and survival, and she would wear them proudly. Captain Reynolds ended the meeting with a powerful reminder. "We fight not just for ourselves," he said. "We fight for everyone who believes in a future worth living. The enemy may be strong, but together, we are stronger. Our scars are proof of that strength." The veterans stood united, ready to face the rising threat. Mia's heart pounded with determination. The hidden war was no longer hidden, and the battle for Earth's future was only getting fiercer. The day of the final battle had arrived. Mia and her team stood together at the edge of the battlefield, the sun barely rising behind the dark clouds. The air was thick with tension and the sound of distant thunder. Each soldier checked their weapons and gear one last time, their faces set with determination. The scars on Mia's arms burned as if reminding her of every fight she had ever faced. But this battle was different. This was the fight that would decide the future of Earth. The hidden war was coming to light, and there was no turning back. Captain Reynolds looked at the team and said, "We fight as one, for our world, for those we lost, and for those who still believe." The team nodded, their silence stronger than any words. As the enemy forces appeared on the horizon, Mia's heart raced, but her hands were steady. The first wave of attackers moved quickly and fiercely. The veterans fought bravely, their experience and unity giving them strength. Mia moved like a shadow, striking with precision and speed. The battle was loud and chaotic, with explosions and laser fire lighting the dark sky. But despite the chaos, Mia could feel the power of her team, the bond that held them together through every danger. The scars she once hid now felt like armor, protecting her not just physically but in spirit. She fought not just for herself, but for every person who had ever judged her without knowing her story. The enemy pressed harder, but the veterans held their ground. Captain Reynolds led the charge, inspiring the team with his courage. Slowly, the tide of battle began to turn. The enemy's strength was great, but the veterans' will was greater. They pushed forward, fighting through pain and fear. Mia looked around at her teammates, some wounded, some exhausted, but all still fighting. She realized that their scars were more than marks of past battles. They were symbols of hope and survival. With a fierce cry, Mia and her team launched the final attack, breaking the enemy's line and sending them retreating into the shadows. As silence finally fell over the battlefield, Mia stood among her team, breathing heavily but proud. The war was over for now. The hidden fight had come to light, and the world would never be the same. Mia's scars no longer made her invisible or weak. They made her a hero. Captain Reynolds placed a hand on her shoulder and said quietly, "You've shown the world what courage really means." The crowd of survivors gathered around them, their eyes full of respect and gratitude. For the first time, Mia felt truly seen and accepted. The scars told a story not of pain, but of strength, sacrifice, and hope, and that story would live on.